Hi, it's Dr. Mann, OBGYN and lifestyle medicine. Tonight, it's my inaugural s- speech, and I would like to present to you a talk that I've given a couple of times. I gave it to a administration of a girls' high school, yeshiva high school. I've given it to teenagers, and I've given it to inexperienced workers at Maimonides that were involved in discharge planning for psychiatrically ill patients. So, the title of my talk, and I didn't change the date, is Does What We Really Matter? What Does the Science Say? You know, in the world of OBGYN, we're doing a lot of medicine nowadays, and I joke around and I say that if we were still doing prescriptions on paper, I would need four prescription pads, one to treat thyroid disease, one to treat prediabetes, and another two to treat anxiety and depression. This is what I'm doing nowadays. Can't we do a little bit better? So let's talk about everything starts in the gut. I'm just going to briefly review human digestion. We eat food, we chew it, we swallow it. The food goes into our stomach. Digestion starts in the mouth and it continues in the stomach. And then further digestion occurs, and the contents go from the stomach into these loops of small bowel. And the small bowel is where most of absorption of nutrients occurs. But then there's leftovers that the body does not digest. Those leftovers go into the large intestine. As you can see here, there's the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the anus. The large colon is where the undigested elements go, and water is secreted into the lumen of the colon, and then the waste is excreted. What have we learned now? And this is new. Actually, it's not new, it's about 20 years old. We know that there are trillions of microbes living in our colon. Not only living in our colon, they live on our skin, in our mouth, in our nose, in our lungs. And they live throughout our intestinal tract, but are especially concentrated in the large intestine. And they also are in the female reproductive tract. There are so many of these organisms, they're barely countable. And these bacteria and other microorganisms digest our leftovers. I made a little cartoon of the human digestive tract to demonstrate what this process is all about. The digestive tract is a 26-foot long tube. This is a representation of our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, our small intestine, and our large intestine, and the exit. What is digestion? Digestion is the process of making food and drink suitable for absorption of nutrients and elimination of waste. Digestion is mechanical and chemical. What does that mean? Well, mechanical means chewing, massaging, breaking down the food. And chemical means that there are enzymes which break down the food into basic elements that can be absorbed. So let's say you eat a nice lentil soup and it goes through the body, through the tube of the intestine. What we have learned, I'm sorry, I'm just getting used to this oversensitive computer that my son is giving me to use. So what happens in the mouth? Chewing and enzymes work on the food, especially starches. We have enzymes in our mouth to digest starch. The esophagus conducts food to the stomach. In the stomach, there's both mechanical and enzymatic digestion. The stomach churns and stomach acid is secreted to help break down proteins. In the small intestine, digestion is finished and the nutrients are absorbed. That means they cross out of this digestive tube to be sent all over the body. In the large intestine, also called the colon, undigested food is eaten by bacteria and other microorganisms. Now, here's a cartoon of the microbiome that I explained to you before. You have microorganisms, little buggies, living throughout your digestive tract, and they're most crowded in the large intestine. There are trillions of them, and they are alive and they are hungry. When you eat fiber-rich whole foods, they eat the fiber. When they eat the fiber, they make short-chain fatty acids for you. I'm going to repeat that. Short-chain fatty acids. Those are the end products of the digestion of the microbiome. Short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids go into your bloodstream and make you healthier. If you don't eat fiber-rich foods, your good bacteria will have nothing to eat, and that is when health problems start. Additionally, if you eat some fermented food, like this cabbage that's been lacto-fermented, that means it's not cabbage with vinegar poured on it. It's cabbage with some salt poured on it to kill off the bad microorganisms, and the good microorganisms can thrive. Those are called lactobacilli. That's why it's called lacto-fermented cabbage. And that's why people are taking lots and lots of supplements. But as I'm going to explain to you, maybe not today, but maybe in another talk, when we eat whole foods, we're getting tremendous benefits compared to supplements. And the reason why I now colored my entire digestive tract green on top of all the microorganisms is that these lacto-fermented foods release these bacteria all along the digestive tract, and they interact with the bacteria that are already there, and they work together in harmony to create the most splendid short-chain fatty acids to keep you healthy. Now, what are short-chain fatty acids? They're little molecules, but look at all of what they do. They protect the gut, they protect overall health, they're anti-inflammatory, improve metabolism of sugar and fat, improved immunity. They guide angiogenesis, which is a formation of new blood vessels, and they aid stem cells to differentiate into types of cells that the body needs at any given time. A stem cell is a cell that can turn into any kind of a cell. This information was taken by a book called Eat to Beat Disease by Dr. Lee. It's an excellent book, and I recommend that everybody read it. And here's a little cartoon representing the bacteria in your colon. They're campaigning, please eat food with fiber, send it to us. And I put down a little sentence at the bottom, I added it in. Dr. Mann adds, in the name of Dr. Christopher Gardner, who's a world-renowned researcher on the human microbiome, please also eat some fermented foods so that it will be easier for us to digest the fiber. It turns out that the bacteria that are in the fermented foods interact with the bacteria in the colon, and they kind of become a strong army together, and it improves the ability of the body to digest the fiber, which leads to the production of generous amounts of short-chain fatty acids that really bump up your health. Okay, so what is fiber? Well, we stand up, we're animals, and plants also stand up. The reason why we stand up is because we have bones. If we didn't have bones, we would be a mush on the floor. But plant cells don't have bones, but what they have is this specialized organ called the cell wall. The cell wall is stiff. It's made of fibers and it helps plants stay up. Little newborn plants and humongous trees. It's all based on the cell wall idea. Now, cell walls are found only in plants. We call the cell wall fiber. Our great grandparents called it roughage. Humans cannot digest this type of fiber, but our microbiome can digest the fiber. And again, I keep repeating myself, but we have to get used to talking about short chain fatty acids. Now, these short chain fatty acids get absorbed through the colon wall, and we use short chain fatty acids everywhere in our body to keep ourselves healthy. If we don't eat fiber rich whole foods, it is hard to stay truly healthy. So, this is what we're supposed to be eating most of the time: fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, whole grains, beans, peas, and lentils. This is plant based eating. These are whole foods. All of these foods are rich in fiber. Now, everybody knows we're supposed to eat fruits and vegetables, and everybody knows nuts and seeds. But what about whole grains? What about beans? We have a common misunderstanding that the only way to get protein is through animal products. And we have another misunderstanding that grains are carbs and carbs are bad. So we're going to speak a little bit about this. These carbs are high in protein, high in fiber, high in nutrition, leading to the formation of short chain fatty acids, and they're absolutely delicious international dishes. No one is going to get diabetes eating these types of foods. Tormuz was found in the Talmud. It's a very high protein bean, second only to soy in terms of protein content. It's eaten throughout the Middle East. Egyptian ful with hummus. This is the national breakfast of Egypt, and ful mitzri is also mentioned in the Talmud. Koshari is another Egyptian bean-based dish. It has rice, lentils, chickpeas, pasta, and some onions on top. It's absolutely delicious. There's a tomato sauce in there. These are elegant bean dishes. Here's minestrone. It's an Italian soup with chickpeas and kidney beans, basil, tomato, and pasta. Delicious and healthy. Harira, that's a Moroccan soup with also chickpeas and lentils, tomato broth, different vegetables, and pasta. And Gigantes plaki, this is a Greek dish of the famous Greek beans with a tomato-based sauce and vegetables. It's absolutely delicious. All of these dishes are filling. All of them will help fix your microbiome and push it in the healthy direction. Now, let's talk about wheat. Everybody's afraid of wheat in this day and age, but I want to show you that a wheat kernel is a very healthy food. And in fact, in the Bible, it shows that Ruth, who picked the leftover stalks of wheat, she sustained herself very well on wheat. And as we all know in this story, she did not have fertility problems eating wheat. In fact, she was able to conceive her child on her wedding night by eating wheat. But if you look at this wheat kernel, how they've been studying it, you see all of these nutrients that are there that occur in the entire wheat kernel. But in a simplistic way, you could think of the wheat kernel as having three parts: the bran, which is the outer coating that protects, the germ, which is actually the little baby wheat, and the endosperm, which is mostly starch and some protein. And this is a complete wheat kernel. What do we do to a wheat kernel? Well, we turn it into an ultra-processed white powder. And this is part of the reason why we're so unhealthy. An entire whole grain of wheat, which is shown here, is a kernel. But what do they do to it? They crush it, they separate it out, they take away the bran, they take away the so called middlings, which is actually sent for horse feed. They take away the little baby, which is the wheat germ that has vitamin E, and a freshly ground wheat kernel, there's fresh vitamin E in there. And the wheat germ oil, they remove that also. What are you left with? You're left with the so called endosperm, the white flour, which is practically devoid of nutrients, has a little protein. And in order to protect people from getting sick, this flour has to be fortified with certain vitamins, or people will start to get vitamin deficiencies. All the vitamins that you need are in the rest of the wheat kernel, but all of that is taken away due to business. Because once you grind a whole grain, it goes rancid, it spoils. The delicate wheat germ oil inside the wheat kernel, once it's exposed to air, it undergoes oxidation and it's spoiled. And furthermore, a lot of the nutrients deteriorate and the flour doesn't taste good. So what companies do is they grind up the whole grain, they get rid of all the healthy stuff, and they put the delicious white powder in a bag that can sit on the shelf for a very, very long time. And I truly believe that this is what is chiefly responsible for the sicknesses that we're seeing, besides all the other problems. We don't have the right bread in our community. And we're just busy eating processed food. What does processed food mean? It's food that's made in a factory. This is the standard American diet, also known as SAD. Two-thirds processed food, food made in a factory. A quarter animal foods, which has no fiber whatsoever. And finally, we're left with 12% plant foods. Half is processed in the factory. And finally, you get to whole plant foods, 6%. And of course, we're eating too much salt. So again, what is ultra processed food? Food most often made in a factory with ingredients that you'll never find in a home kitchen. And what's wrong with ultra processed food? Oy vavoy. Well, ultra processed foods do not promote health. They prevent us from thriving. They give calories, but they do not give nutrition. Ultra processed foods cause overeating because we don't get nutrition, and so our body is asking for more. I'm sorry, but this is not food. This is an ultra processed product devoid of nutrition that gives calories, and it's given to our children. Something's got to be done. And I don't mind talking to the manufacturer, but this bread, it has to be phased out because it's not doing our society any good. Now, you may say to me, what's all this microbiome stuff? I'm making it all up. It's my own personal opinion. But guess what? It's science. Let me prove this to you. Let's talk about a baby. Can I tell a baby, a newborn, listen, you need to eat celery now because you have a microbiome in there and they need fiber? Not exactly. But let's talk about human milk, which is the perfect food for baby. Human milk is mostly water. And then at the top, you see here, there's a small amount of the other elements. So what's in here? Here it shows you. Let's skip the yellow box for now. Protein, 8 grams per liter. A liter is like a quart. Very little protein in infant form, in mother's milk. Lipids, those are the milk fats, which are important. And lactose, which is the milk sugar. Now, what is HMO? I have more slides, but I want to keep it brief. HMO stands for human milk oligosaccharides. These are different types of sugar molecules, or we could call them starch molecules And these HMOs are produced in mother's milk, but the baby does not have enzymes to digest HMOs. Only bacteria and other microbes can digest HMOs. What does it mean? It means inside the mother's genes, she has programmed inside of her the ability to create food for microbes, for bacteria and other microorganisms living in the baby's intestines. And this to me is a miracle. And this to me proves what we've been learning all along. We live together with our microbes. We have to feed our microbes. There's a miracle that mother's milk contains food for microbes. The baby can't digest it. It's only for microbes. But what happens once we get bigger and we're not having human milk anymore? We have to understand that our microbes still need to be fed. Things don't change. But unfortunately, with the current westernized diet that we're eating, our microbes are not thriving. And we have decreased diversity of microbes. And we have leaky gut and all of these problems that come from not having the proper number and diversity of microbes in our intestinal tract. And it is believed now in this day and age that the source of chronic illness is the intestine. You are what you eat. And please keep this slide in your mind to know that what Dr. Mann is saying tonight, it's the truth and it's biology. So let's do a quiz. What is the microbiome? Answer: the microorganisms, which we can also nickname gut buddies, that live inside us. What does the microbiome do? Answer: digest fiber. What is the name of what they produce? Answer: short-chain fatty acids. What do SCFAs do? Answer: keep us healthy. A bonus question. Does meat, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy have fiber? No, they have no fiber. And that's why we should eat them sparingly. We're not saying to never eat it. It's not what this is about. What we're saying is to put it in its proper place. Keep that in mind. And again, what these foods mostly have is protein and fat. And of course, milk has lactose, which is sugar. Here's our picture of Abraham Avinu, our father Abraham. And he's preparing a sumptuous meal for the three angels that are coming to greet him. What does he feed? He feeds dairy and he feeds meat. And that's for special occasions. I truly believe that our father Abraham did not eat meat, chicken, fish, eggs, and dairy 3 times a day. Probably it was hummus. So let's now get into the myth of protein. Whenever I talk to a patient and I tell them they have to improve their eating, this is how they answer me, invariably. So I have to eat more protein and less carbs, right? And I say, no, you have to eat the right amount of protein and the right type of protein and the right type of carbs. And then you're going to be healthy. And please, let's stay away from the term carbs. Let's say whole grains. How about that? Fact: protein needs to be adequate. More is not better. Protein needs are obviously higher for growing children and expecting moms. But once we are grown, protein needs remain steady according to ideal body weight. Another bonus, and in conclusion, what should I do? Answer: eat less processed foods, eat less animal foods, eat more whole plant foods, and eat a variety of whole plant foods. And please enjoy. Again, today was the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to talk about, but I wanted to give this brief introduction. I have practically 1,000 slides to show, and I've been making these slides diligently because I just have to get the message out there. And I want to thank you for listening. And since I had given this original talk in March and it was a leap year, this is my little perm slide. Thank you.